trigger warning. This podcast episode contains mentions of emotional and narcissistic abuse. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Emotional Abuse is Real. I'm your host, Serene Leeds, and I'm so glad you're here. I just want to take a moment to thank everyone who has listened, subscribed, rated, and reviewed this podcast so far, as well as the kind folks who have personally reached out to me to let me know how grateful they are that this podcast exists. I really didn't know if I was going to make any sort of impact when I started doing this podcast, and it means the world to know that, well, that's exactly what I'm doing. However, emotional abuse is real still needs your support, and there are several ways you can do that. First of all, if you're a listener and you've been mulling over sharing your story, please don't hesitate to reach out via Instagram at Serene Leeds Writes, that's SareneLeedsWrites, or via our Emotional Abuse is Real Facebook page, or via email. My email address is hello@sereneleads.com. A reminder that anonymous guests are always welcome. And if you are a mental health professional and would like to offer your clinical insights, I would love to feature you on the podcast as well. Another way you can support Emotional Abuse is Real is by heading over to Apple Podcasts and both leaving a rating and writing a review. The more reviews we get, the easier it is for people to find this podcast. Finally, you can support the podcast by following me on Instagram at Serene Leeds Writes and following our Facebook page, Emotional Abuse is Real. And if you are able, please consider donating to our Buy Me a Coffee page, which I've linked in the show notes. As I've said before, this is a one-woman operation, and your donations help fund the podcast's production costs. I'd also like to remind you about my free newsletter. This is a great opportunity to stay up to date on my latest published articles, as well as new podcast episodes. Also, it's a wonderful way to stay in touch with me directly, as I'm using the newsletter as another outlet for storytelling. You never know what story you'll get in your inbox when you sign up. Plus, as an added bonus, I send out a free delicious dessert recipe to every new subscriber. I've left the sign-up link in the show notes, and you can also subscribe directly via my website, sereneleads.com. On today's episode, I chat with Jessica Knight. Not only is Jessica an emotional abuse survivor, but she's channeled her experience into a fruitful career as a certified emotional and narcissistic abuse coach, as well as a high-conflict divorce coach. She is also the host of the Relationship Recovery podcast, where she offers expert insights on emotional and narcissistic abuse-centric topics, such as trauma bonding. Before we get into our conversation, please know that I understand the content on this podcast may be difficult for many of you. I've spoken to several people who want to listen to this podcast and who do want to share their stories, but they just don't feel ready to do either yet. I'm here to tell you that I completely understand your decision. As I've done on previous episodes, I am more than happy to narrate your story if you don't feel comfortable appearing on the podcast. Also, please know that it's taken me nearly a decade after my own emotional abuse experience to be able to talk about it so openly. I'm always happy to chat with you over Instagram DM, the podcast Facebook page, or via email. So, without further ado, here's my conversation with Jessica Knight.
My name is Jessica Knight. I am a life coach and I specialize in helping people overcome emotional and narcissistic abuse and also how to deal with it when you're inside of it. And I also am a high conflict divorce coach. So if you are divorcing a narcissist, a sociopath, or just a high conflict individual, I can provide strategies and tools and how to do that in a more effective way, because it's not like divorcing a regular person.
That is correct. I have so many stories on that front, but I
Yeah.
can't really get into detail,
A lot of us
unfortunately.
can't. A
No,
lot of us can't.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. I always say at the start of the podcast, I know that there are actually a lot of people who can't even bring themselves to listen yet. And I know
Hmm.
that they want to, and I get it. So this isn't going anywhere. And, that's why I'm so happy to have you on the podcast, and everybody who comes on to tell their story are such brave individuals, and they're role models to us all. Um, so I know that you have your own podcast and that you've shared parts of your own emotional abuse story on the podcast. And I know that for a number of reasons, you don't like to tell the full story, but to start things off, I would love it if you could please
Hmm.
share your emotional abuse story in a way that you're most comfortable.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Great.
Um, yeah. Yeah. And I guess the disclaimer is that like if you feel like I am leaving things out, I might be doing it on purpose, but please feel
Sure.
free just to ask. And
Okay.
it's just basically when you are in the family court system, anything you say can and will be used against you. um,
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly.
And so and also, one day I don't want my daughter to find this and be like, "Oh, you said all these things."
Of course.
But
Absolutely.
yeah, but
Absolutely.
I grew up in abuse. So I grew up in an
Yeah.
emotionally and verbally abusive home, and a physically abusive home. And
Hmm.
even as a kid, I was told it's not that bad. Like I was just very gaslit, and I also gaslit myself because I told myself that because it's not sexual abuse, it's not real abuse. And I
Mm,
don't know where I got that from. Probably just being, a kid and what you hear about on TV and things like that. But it was severe physical abuse and probably even more severe emotional abuse. And
yeah.
I got out like basically the second that I could. I was like the kid that ran away all the time, and then I ran away, and that was it. And
Yeah.
so as I grew up, I definitely did not have any healthy coping mechanisms. And I also didn't really have any relationships or any self confidence. So, like, I would
Hmm.
find myself in relationships with people that really only liked me a certain way, or when I dressed a certain way, or when I acted a certain way, or like didn't like me when I drank, but wanted me to go out and have fun. And it was just like I was in these cycles and completely trauma bonded to somebody from high school, like the first guy that I ever found attractive and that he actually found me attractive. It was just sort of like this cycle that kind of set me off on a path of really unhealthy relationships.
Sure.
And I I kept thinking that because I changed so much, people could change, and that people, not that I necessarily would change them, but that they would want to change. And that's obviously not true, especially with high conflict or abusive people or
Yeah.
narcissists. And I ended up marrying somebody in my high school that was very popular, that had found me later on in life. It was actually at a time that I was just out of a relationship, and he basically love bombed the shit out of me.
Hmm.
And there were so many red flags that I just like looked the other way because I saw the person that I think I wanted to be in high school. Like I was this messed up running away kid, and he was like the class president, and I was like,
Yeah.
oh, okay, like I think I wanted that story. And I not
Sure.
only wanted that story, which feels in hindsight like a bit of a redemption story for that version of myself, because I didn't
Hmm.
see all the things I did to survive. And I also I had always been in therapy, so I had always been working on myself. I was in coaching, but I don't think that I realized how much of it I was just like kind of trained to cover up or
Hmm.
trained to see was normal. And so if we are abused as kids, or if we don't have any examples of healthy relationships, which a lot of us don't, we tend
Yeah.
to normalize abnormal behavior, which I did. And as that relationship went on, um, and he asked to marry me, it was like all these things, all these moments I felt severe anxiety when I wanted to feel happy, but I thought it was just me. And like that was always what I went back to, was it must just be me. It must just be me. I'm not trying enough. Like maybe I'm not cutting him enough slack. Maybe I'm hard on him, when like that wasn't the truth. Like the truth was not that. The truth was like I was working 3 jobs. I had gotten pregnant. Like there was a lot of things that were going on that,
Mhm.
and he was abusing drugs and alcohol, and
Mhm.
also being very mean. And so I have the baby, and anyone that knows that, like, once an event happens that somebody who's narcissistic starts to really come out, so it's like something that is like final, that like, so sometimes people notice it when they get engaged, sometimes people notice it when they get married. For me, I felt like it was more it was a lot of those moments, but when I had my daughter, it felt like that was it. Like everything started to change. I was so depressed, like, and
Mhm.
I had been so like, the relationship was over months and months before. The relationship
Sure.
was over like a month after I found out I was pregnant.
Yeah.
But I tried to stay, and
Mhm.
then I just was losing myself. And I remember this one day, and I have the journal still. I walked, my daughter must have been like 4 months old, if not less than that.
Mhm.
I bundled her up. I walked to CVS, and I bought a journal and I bought a pen because it didn't feel safe enough to leave the house with a journal and a pen.
Mhm.
And I sat at the park until she started to cry, and like basically journaled. And every entry from that point reads as, I can't do this anymore. I can't do this
Yeah.
anymore.
Sure.
And that's the first line. And so
Yeah.
I then end up leaving this relationship, which is extreme. Like there's a lot of context in between that I didn't touch
I
on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And then take what I always called 2 years off to heal, which I
Mhm.
thought was 2 years off to heal, which was unintentional. I had a 1-year-old, and I was a single parent, and I was now working, actually still working 3 jobs at that time. Now,
Yeah.
now it's only one, but at that point it was three.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was, and like I was full on survival mode. And then eventually I I decide, look, if I'm avoiding even the idea of dating, I might want to try this. It was 2 years later. I was trying to get like back on my feet again, with in terms of like being social and seeing friends.
Yeah.
And and I also was in my mid 30s, or I am in my mid 30s. So I was in my lower 30s.
Right.
I wanted another baby, and like,
Mhm.
but I felt so afraid of it. I felt so afraid of everyone. So my friends were like, you need to just try your best to date. And so this is actually when the pandemic hit. So like I went on my
Ah.
first date the day that the pandemic started.
Oh,
But
wow.
yeah,
Oh my God, that's
basically the
crazy.
day of lockdown, I had my first date, which ended up being a walking date because of like
Yeah.
what happened.
Right.
And then I date a little bit. I realize, oh my God, I have so much more to work on. What is like, this sucks. And then
Yeah.
I end up meeting someone who, again, love bombed the shit out of me. I didn't know it was love
Oh.
bombing. And
Yeah.
that ended
Yeah.
up being a highly abusive, emotionally abusive relationship.
Ugh.
Like,
Yeah.
and that kind of, that was actually, that's what I almost refer to as my emotionally abusive relationship. Like
Mhm.
I was so in survival mode in my marriage that I didn't even realize a lot of the time what was going on. Whereas in this relationship, I would be gaslit and be like, I am being gaslit right now, and I
Right,
don't
right,
know how to respond to it. And
right,
then it would be like, oh my God, you're blaming me for something that you did, and you feel guilty. So now you're making me feel bad. But like, you can't tell them that. And
right.
so it was just this cycle of like, I'm going to get this person to see that they did something, that they're like what they're doing, and that
Yeah.
goes nowhere.
Nope.
And so I that actually led me into really unpacking and understanding what I went through, because in order to get through that, I had to learn what abuse was.
Yeah.
And I mean, like my friends say it now, but they also said it then, that I see abuse everywhere I go. And I'm like, well, look, like it's kind of been like my life story is kind of like a web of abuse,
Yeah.
like that I've had to navigate through. But
Mhm.
also, there's a lot of abuse in the world. Like there's a lot of
Yeah.
abusive behavior that we don't call
Yes.
abuse because people are afraid of this big word with a
Yes.
capital A, but I'm like, but I just want to make that word all capitals and be like this is what we're experiencing, people.
Exactly.
Um
Yeah.
and then so I know that was a bit long, but that's kind of what got me here because getting out of that relationship was so painful despite
Yeah.
being in it was also so painful. It was like cutting off my right hand.
Oh, God. No, no, no. I mean, that's totally fine. Look,
Mhm.
it's very rare that I'm going to say to somebody who tells their story, no, that wasn't enough. No,
Mhm.
you got to give me more than
Yeah.
that, you know? And and what you said about how there are so many different forms of abuse, well, that's why you're doing the work you're doing. That's why I started this podcast, and you have your own podcast. I'm so grateful that this topic is finally being discussed in public places because um, when I dealt with my own experience, which we're coming up on 9 years of me ending it. It was a workplace
Mhm.
situation. No one would talk to me about it. Everyone brushed it off. No one thought it was real, which is why I named this podcast "Emotional Abuse is Real." So from from there, so what did you do to start the healing process, and from there move into your coaching career?
From so while I so that relationship started the beginning of September of
Hmm.
2020. 2020 was
2020.
COVID, right? Yeah,
Yeah,
so I
yeah,
guess it
yeah,
was 2020.
yeah.
And then it went on for about a year and a half
Hmm.
after. But
Hmm.
but because it was a COVID relationship, essentially,
Yeah,
we had all this time that we spent together. And so whereas, now in the world, like, I barely, I mean, I see my partner, but like during the day I can barely see him because he's not just here, like he's in meetings, he's running around. And so it's
sure.
um and I mean as am I. And so it's like there's this we were just around each other a lot more, and
Yeah,
weekend time there weren't many things open. It was the winter. It ended up being the winter, I I did not want to, like, I didn't find the point of going out to eat and wearing a mask out in the world. I was like, let's just like stay in. I'd rather stay in or order in or like find ways to be more comfortable. So
yeah.
we ended up spending a ton of time together. And I just remember, like, I remember once again finding myself in that same pattern of it must be me. And then
Mm,
these little things
yeah.
just kept on happening and things just kept not making any sense. Like,
Hmm.
there was this one situation, I believe I want to say this was around November. So 2 months after dating, we're watching a documentary. It was like a Friday night in, because again, like there was nothing
Yeah,
we could do anyway.
yeah.
Um, and I started to get a migraine. It was just like a
Mm,
typical like long day, probably
yeah,
didn't drink enough water. My head is hurting. I took
yeah,
medicine. It didn't help. And
yeah,
I look at the time and I'm like, okay, I need to clean the kitchen so I can go to bed. Like we had
yeah,
made dinner. And so I get up, I'm cleaning the kitchen. My daughter had been asleep
yeah.
and he starts yelling at me for being mad that he's not helping. And I was like, excuse me?
What?
Like, and he's like, you're slamming things. I'm like, I was like, this drawer doesn't close. Like I closed the drawer. Like, like
Oh
this is my
man.
apartment, and then it turns into this thing. And I'm like, I can't have this. I can't have this argument. One, you're wrong. And two, my head is killing me. Like I
Yeah,
am not a
yeah,
human being right now.
yeah.
And he was like, there's always something with you.
Oh
Always
no.
something.
Yep.
And I was
Hmm.
like, and I'm just sitting there thinking, like, what is happening? And I remember I texted my friend and I was like, and they were like, that first, this isn't okay. And two, your job is to get yourself to sleep. That's all you need to do. Your head hurts. Like, I'm not migraine like prone really. And they
Right.
were like, if for you to say it's this bad, it means it's bad. And
Yeah.
so I remember I kept trying to go to sleep and he wouldn't let me.
Oh.
He kept arguing with me
Oh God.
until
Yeah.
like, until I apologized for cleaning. And I remember like looking back at that situation being like, that was probably the first time that I noticed this behavior, but all I could focus on was what I was doing. Like,
Yeah.
okay, maybe I looked mad, maybe this, maybe that. Instead of being like, yeah, maybe you looked unhappy, you had a fucking migraine, but like all you wanted to do was to go to bed. And
Yeah.
so, and I'm a single parent. So like I do take care of things that are for myself, but also this was my house. So I was like, I don't even want him to help me clean. I just want to get to bed. That's all I
Yeah.
cared about was like, he probably could have left the dishes in the sink overnight. That's not something I like to do. It doesn't matter.
Hmm.
But I had so many little situations like that. And then I started to have these big situations where I realized that one, I could never get out of an argument with him. I could never just stop it. And two, I always had to be the bad guy, or I always was at fault, or there was
Yeah.
never a mistake. Like
Yeah.
there's never any mistakes on my end. There's never,
Yeah.
anything like that. And but it would be from like this place of like, control and
Hmm.
anger. Like
Yeah.
he had to be right, despite the
Yes.
fact that like I was the one with a pretty long relationship history with a few different individuals that I did learn a lot from,
Yeah.
and it just kind of kept snowballing and things would get bigger and bigger. Like it got to the point where I couldn't even say, I don't want to do this. Like
Hmm.
I remember one time I had these plans. We had these plans. I think we had tickets booked, and he said something like, "Oh, so there's this person's birthday. I don't have to go. Let me know what you think. I'm open to either." And I was like, honestly, if the birthday's really important to you, we can go. But I personally would prefer to do with the tickets, the thing that we have the tickets for. That's what I have the babysitter for. And,
Yeah.
and I remember like, that wasn't okay. It was like, it was presented in a way of like,
Yeah.
I don't care either way, until then it became like, you don't want me to go to my best friend's birthday, which then just snowballed and snowballed and snowballed.
Yeah.
And it turned into this conversation that I recorded. And this is when I started to realize what I was going through, because I was like,
Yeah.
oh my God, I, this is not what healthy is. Like, and I
Hmm.
know this, but I don't understand what's happening. So I recorded the conversation in which he wrote out our texts on a Word document, shared it with me in Zoom, and then walked me through the conversation that we had with my intended tone
Oh
from the
boy.
messages. And the whole time I'm sitting there like, is this really happening? Like, that's not the tone that I had. That's not the way I said that. Like,
No.
and I was walking on eggshells. So
Yeah.
I remember like responding to this text. It probably took me 12 minutes to write out like, I would like to do this, but if you want to do this, that's fine, which is not me.
Yeah.
And people in my life were pointing out that it wasn't me. I was getting into these like long arguments that would last all night, that I just like was not showing up well for my life.
Hmm.
And after started listening to that conversation over and over. It ended up being 4 hours long.
Wow.
And after that, I just was like, I was writing notes. I paid my therapist to listen to parts of it. I had a friend listen to whatever he was willing to listen to, and I started to break away some of these pieces of what was actually happening. And now
Yeah.
I never told this person that I recorded it,
Yeah.
but I remember I did it as a tool to try and figure out what exactly was happening. And all I could hear was like how gaslit I was, how my experience
Yeah.
didn't matter,
Yeah.
how angry he got. And then when he got angry, he refused to go on video, but then he would get really mad. He would stonewall me.
Hmm.
And then it would be like, I just broke this and it's all your fault. And I'd be like, I am
Oh
in my
God.
house, sir. It is not my fault. Like,
Oh
and
wow.
and it was just like he could not ever just have his own, like he couldn't own anything. He
No.
couldn't see how he was acting. He couldn't see
No.
that this was like the 12th time he was asking me to cancel plans to do something with his friends. Like he
Yeah.
couldn't see that I just did it, like nothing mattered.
Yeah.
And that was the theme probably of all our disagreements, was that I had a perspective that was different than his, and because I didn't change my perspective, then he had to make it so that I did, and that I also had to feel bad for the fact that I even had a different perspective, which made me feel resentful and like a piece of crap. Like I felt
Yep.
worthless. I was like, but the kicker is I couldn't get out of it. I could
Yeah.
not bring myself to leave because I wanted him to change and to see that he was losing somebody who was like willing to be patient for him. And like he had
Yeah.
promised therapy for months and didn't
Yeah.
go. He had promised he promised therapy, and then he switched to couples therapy, and then he switched back to regular therapy, and then he agreed to therapy. Again, I found somebody, and within 3 sessions he was like, "It's not working, I'm done." And I'm like, "Well, you literally just sat there and said that there was no issues. I could feel your anger next to me." And
Mm-hmm.
and then you blew up on me after the session. Of course, and so I just kept trying to figure out, like, how can I leave and feel okay? Because it
Yeah.
felt like if I left, I was not going to be okay.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I didn't understand that. Like, and the outside world doesn't understand that either. Like, they
Mm-hmm.
think this person's treating you poorly, just leave. But I was so stuck in the cycle of abuse.
Yeah.
And the cycle of abuse goes from calm to tensions rising to abusive incident to reconciliation back to calm. And
Yeah.
I got so addicted to reconciliation. And
Mm-hmm.
when I work with people, that's what I actually say is like where the trauma bond is formed is
Mm-hmm.
when we reconcile, because all we want are those days between reconciling and calm. Like, because
Yeah.
that's when we're like half in honeymoon phase again. We're communicating. It seems like this person can communicate with us. They might have even given us a half-ass apology
Mm-hmm.
until we do one thing wrong, and then tensions start to rise, and then there's always an incident. And when tensions are rising, I'm back in fight or flight again. Like, I'm back in my trauma response. I am second guessing my texts. I am, you
Yeah.
know, not showing up for my life. And I then so the only thing I knew how to do was I need to try and set boundaries to come back to myself. And so
Yeah.
which are hard to set with an abusive individual.
Yes,
Um
they are.
but I think it's essential. So, like, I have
Mhm.
this $19 course on my website
Yeah.
for how to set a boundary with an abuser,
Mhm.
on emotionalabusecoach.com. And the reason it's $19 is because it's like, I think it's so essential. And it's basically the formula that I came up with when I was going through this, which is you need, you need to, I need to do something to remove myself from the harm. If I stay in the harm, I don't have a boundary. Like, a boundary with a healthy person keeps them in our life. A
Yes.
boundary with an abusive person, we need to, like, the purpose of them, and I knew this at the time, was just so I could think for myself again. Because when I was in
Mhm.
his orbit, I couldn't think for myself.
Mhm.
All I did was get blamed. And that helped me begin to see in moments when I was being gaslit and say, nope, nope. And that made him outraged. He was
Mhm.
outraged. The anger increased. It got to the point of him throwing things at me. I was
Oh,
like, nope,
sorry.
nope. And
Yeah.
so then there was boundaries around, like, it was probably like I think we really, really broke up probably that October. But my daughter, like, I wouldn't do anything with him around my kid.
Mhm.
Like, so, like,
Mhm.
I kind of, like, I removed that from the situation.
Good.
I moved into a new apartment. We were
Mhm.
talking about moving in together, and I was like, nope. And I found a place that could only fit me and my daughter, and that's what I wanted. I mean, that's really what I
Good.
wanted, I think, anyway. But I started to set these boundaries, and I
Good.
even said, like, if you yell at me, I'm leaving. And
Mhm.
that was one of the biggest ones I had, is like, if you continue to yell at me, I'm leaving. I remember
Yeah.
him going, no, you're doing this so that you can be the victim. And I was like, if you continue to yell at me, I'm picking up my bag and I'm walking out the door. And then
Mhm.
I yell, 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 yell. And I picked up my bag and walked out the door. And the first time did that, I live in Boston. So it was like
Yeah.
3 city streets away was my car. And I could hear
Right.
him screaming, like, out.
Ugh.
And I was like, oh my God, if I stayed, that's what I would have been dealing with.
Yeah.
And I was terrified. Like, I make it
Sure.
sound like I'm strong and I left, but I was
No.
shaking. I was terrified. I was crying. I could barely
Absolutely.
send a text to a friend.
Mhm.
And I remember, like, I drove home, and I sat in my car. I calmed myself down, and I went in. And that was like that really was the beginning of the end. It just took a really long time
Yeah.
because he kept promising change and then
Yep.
just wouldn't do it.
Mhm. Mhm.
And
Yeah.
I think I wanted someone to change. Like, somebody once
Oh
asked me,
god,
like,
yeah.
yeah,
That's all I ever wanted
anyone.
from my abuser. That cuz the reason why I I smile so much at your
Mhm.
stories, not because I'm like, "Oh, wow, isn't that great?" No,
Yeah.
it's because even though my abuser was my boss, there are so many similarities between what you just described and what I went through. So, yeah, anyway. Yeah.
Yeah.
As you were saying.
Yeah, it's just like it's you want I think I wanted someone to change so bad. I definitely
Yeah.
was trauma bonded because I was in this cycle of like intermittent abuse followed by positive reinforcement all the time.
Hmm.
And it felt like love. Like I actually was like, okay, maybe he's my soulmate. Like I really felt, now looking back, it feels delusional, which is like a good thing because I never thought I would think that way, when I was in it. It's like now I
Yeah.
think, but at the time I was like, there's there's so much good. And like at his core, at the time I would have said he's a good person on the inside. I would not say that now. I think he's a highly manipulative person on the inside.
Oh yeah.
But
Yeah.
I think I think I wanted anyone to change, like
Absolutely.
one
That's how
singular
I felt.
person. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, I I stayed so much longer in my job than I probably should have because, well, like as I say in the podcast, it was Rolling Stone. I didn't like the idea of kind of being chased out of my job by a horrendous person who was emotionally abusing me every day. But there was just this hope in the back of my mind that not that he would change, but that someone would notice, like, this is a
Mhm.
problem, but no one wanted to get involved because no one thought, oh, well, it's not like physical or sexual abuse. So what's
Mhm.
the big deal? Just learn to deal with it and do your job. So that was what I was hoping for. I wanted that justice of someone noticing, hey, you cannot treat someone like that. But of course, especially back then in 2014, that was not going to happen.
Yeah.
So I had to
Yeah.
leave. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
And it
so
sucks. Yeah.
it does suck. So all right, so you broke up in late 2021, and then I guess I'll ask my question again.
Mhm.
What was the healing process like, and how did that lead to your coaching business?
So I'll I was a coach before.
Okay.
So I was coaching my business, and I still do this work,
Mhm.
but it's less. I was a millennial life crisis coach. So
Ah,
coaching and healing from all the stuff I was talking about earlier, especially getting over and working through that first relationship that I talked about. It ended up being 6 years of,
yeah,
what I called my high school sweetheart. Like I think
sure.
I was like I wanted a Disney movie so bad, and what I got was like not that. I got a Netflix series. But I remember being like, okay, I want so deeply to feel like a human being. And so I was
Yeah.
doing all this work on myself, and I had always been, I mean, I still do. Like I was so like personal development was like my jam. Like I was doing something all the time. And I became a life coach. I
Yeah.
I had always wanted to, and then when I was having my I just like I had gotten an office job, which against my will, when I was living in Boston, and
Yeah.
I was like, I just was like, I hate this. Like every day, like people would be like, "What's wrong with your job?" And I'm like, "Nothing's wrong with the actual job. I don't mind the job. I just don't want to be there at a certain time. I don't want to wear these clothes. I don't
Oh
want to
yeah.
like commute
Oh
to
yeah.
anything. I don't."
Oh
And
yeah.
so it was just like I was like, and I also don't want to like adhere to like any rules. Like when my work's
Uh-huh.
done, I want to go home. Like
Yes.
but I knew that about
Yes.
myself. I had taught yoga before. I was doing a little bit of coaching in New York. I was a bartender, and I was
Mhm.
just like I was so used to being able to live more freely, and I just thought like this is something that nobody in my life could see me doing, and now here I am, 5 years in, and I hate it. And so I ended up I got it recertified. So I was coaching before, I got recertified, and that I did that with the purpose of like this is going to be my coaching business. And
Mhm.
so while I was going through all of this with this guy and with like the healing from my ex-husband and just single mommying, coaching was it's probably 75% of my full-time job. I had another job on the side
Yeah.
because when you're a single mom, you just hustle and you have
Get
to.
it. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and then I started to realize as I was going through this that there are not a lot of people that do this work, because I kept trying to find a coach that would specialize in helping me get out.
Sure.
And the only resources I found were more around love addiction. And
Mm,
I was like, that's not what this is. Like, I don't
right.
feel like that's what this is. Like, this
Yeah.
feels different. This doesn't feel like I just want to be loved. This feels like, I was like, because I don't have all these other behaviors in other relationships.
Right.
And so I started, and I had always attracted people with either tough relationships or breakups. And I thought that's just because I don't know how the things work in the universe, but I was like, well, maybe it's because like I could handle it, or I could hold it, or I could hold space for these people.
Yeah.
But as I started to heal from this, I was like, oh my God, I was seeing signs of abuse in my clients.
Hmm.
I was getting new clients that were having these toxic relationships. And I was like, okay, I think I can help, but I also need to get training in this, which I
Yeah.
ended up doing probably that October. So if the relationship was ending in October, I'm pretty sure I signed up for something that would have been the beginning of my certification program, which would have been my third coaching certification, but it was specifically in narcissistic and emotional abuse trauma.
Right. So this was
But
2021.
yeah, this is 2021. And I had realized that that whole recorded conversation thing was in April. And from
Okay.
April on, I was completely invested in understanding what abuse was, to the point that I think all of us get there where like we read every single book, we listen to every
Yes.
podcast. We are now obsessed with understanding what this is. And I was obsessed, but it was helping me. It
Yeah.
was also incredibly painful because
Of course.
I was in this dynamic, and this person would see what I was saying in like an instant, but I was not yet at the point of they're not going to change. That took me a long time to get
Yeah. Yeah.
to that
Yeah.
understanding of that he's not going to change because he would have to change the way that he thinks. And
Hmm.
he's not going to do that
Right.
because the one, that's really hard, but two, he doesn't want to. So he's not
Right.
going to.
Exactly.
And
I'm sorry to interrupt. I
yeah,
just want to tell you that how much I admire you for recording that conversation.
thank you.
Even though there's always like questions of legality. I mean, I always wanted to do that with my boss, and I knew that
Yeah.
I just couldn't. But what I did do was I started something what I called a bullying log, and I just wrote down
Yeah.
everything,
Documentation.
the
Yeah.
documentation, and even now it's still so hard to read.
Yeah.
But
Well, I'm glad that you
yeah,
said that, because that's really the answer to your other question, is how did I begin to get out of it? Was I started to
yeah,
get what I call right with reality,
yeah,
and I was journaling everything, and
yes,
I would leave situations. And so if I asked him to do something, like if I was like, "Hey, are you available on this?" I would then write it down. I'd be like,
hmm,
"He said yes to blah blah blah." And
hmm,
then it would be like, okay, when I was gaslit, I would go back to my notes and I'd be like, all right, that's not what happened. I'm not crazy. And it was less about showing him that he's right. And it was more about showing me that I'm not crazy, and
hmm,
that I actually am clear. And I was thinking about these things. And so I have these notebooks of
hmm,
this is what was said.
yeah,
And I have the opposite of like, this is what he's claiming I said. And this is what I know that I said. And so I
yes,
really started to ungaslight myself. And
good for
I
you.
actually I stopped thinking, oh, this must be because of my past, or this must be because of my tough upbringing. Because I was like, you know what? F that. Like
You can curse. I
that
don't
is,
care.
yeah, okay.
Yeah.
That's absolutely part of my trauma and my history. But this is a completely different situation. And he
Mhm,
might blame that for the way that I am, even though he was not a part of it. But
mhm.
I'm going to stay focused on what's happening in this dynamic, in this relationship. And
Yeah,
so I really just started to write down almost everything. And
yeah,
every time I had a question, I would go on Reddit and I would type it. I would in Google, and I would write like signs of, or like, is telling someone that they're abusive a sign of emotional abuse? Because he'd be like, you're abusive. And I'd be like, and then I would
oh
go
my
Reddit. And then I would go and read these stories and
yeah,
read other people and just see myself in their story. And that became I think that for a while my friends were like, you can't break out of this. And I'm like, this is helping me. I am
yeah,
helping myself get out of this dynamic and to understand what's happening. And I think that that's how like and why I'm so passionate in helping people because I know how hard it is because I've been
Yeah,
there, but I
exactly.
also know how gaslit society, how much we can be gaslit by society that wants to
Yes.
tell us that we didn't experience what we experienced and it's not abuse and it's not that bad and we didn't it's like, yes, it was that bad.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yep.
it was super triggering. Yes, I
Mhm.
was
Mhm.
treated like I wasn't a person,
Mhm.
like, and it's like, and yes, this person still expected me to forgive them constantly. And yes, he claimed that he was like so in love with me. It's like, great, good for you. Like, he actually had his mom reach out to me about 4 months ago saying, like,
Really?
yeah, he's wondering how you're doing. And I'm like, I'm alive.
Wow. That
Thank
is
you.
that is that is just so
Hmm.
cowardly,
Yeah.
having his
Well, he's
mom do it
blocked
for
on
him.
he's blocked on
Oh,
everything, so he
yeah,
can't. But
right.
also, like, but I think he also knows, like, his mom was very, like, extremely sweet to me,
Yeah,
extremely sweet to my daughter.
yeah.
Like, I don't want to ever make her feel like a piece of crap, or
Sure,
anything like
yeah.
that.
I get that.
But it's also like, here we go again, this
Yeah,
entitled person.
yeah. The middle
Yeah.
person, but you don't want also just don't wanna be pulled back in.
No, and it didn't.
Wow.
Like it
Yeah.
was interesting. Like it's when I look back now, I don't see myself ever being able to be in a dynamic like that again. But when I was in it at the time, I thought I would keep finding myself in those dynamics because there was something so uncomfortably comfortable about it. Like I was
Mhm.
so used to the push and pull, but now I think that like I finally did the work that I thought I did during those other 2 years to not want to be in those unhealthy dynamics again.
Mhm. So you got your third certification and you started work as an emotional
Hmm.
and narcissistic abuse coach. So um I'd love to give you the opportunity to just talk about what you do for your clients.
Yeah. So, like you said, like abuse could happen in all these different dynamics. So yours
Mhm.
was a workplace, mine was a
Yeah,
relationship.
sure.
There's people that have friendships that are abusive. There are
Mhm.
people that have come from narcissistic families.
Yeah.
I would say that, like, when we're going through these things, a lot of people feel like whatever is happening doesn't make any sense.
Mhm.
And that's if you can't solve it through healthy, like if you like Google something and you're like, I'm going to try this or this, you're probably in an abusive situation in some kind because especially if you're Googling somebody's behavioral patterns, that tells you a
Yeah.
lot too.
Yeah.
And so what I do is I help people, and if you're in an emotionally abusive relationship and either you have to stay for now because you're married and you have kids, or if
Yeah.
you have like, and by, and I say that not because I think that people like quote unquote have to stay. I think that there are some relationships that you might be safer for now if you choose to stay. And that's the perspective you're coming from,
Mhm.
but a lot of people know this, like, the best thing that you can do is leave. But if you're going to stay, I help you stay safer. I help you stay more aware. I help you stay with tools. I hope you help you stay with boundaries, and I help you stay with a plan to hopefully try and begin to get out when you feel ready. But when you're severely trauma bonded, saying you need to leave is just me now I'd be gaslighting someone. So,
Exactly. Yeah.
and if you want to
I was
leave,
like that for a
yeah,
long time with certain people before I understood that. And
yeah.
I for up until me very recently, I was still that stereotypical person. Well, why doesn't she just leave?
Hmm.
And no. Yeah.
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 Yeah, it's like because she can't. Yeah, and so like
Exactly. Yeah.
if that's you, I think when someone's in that place too, I help you understand what's going on.
Mhm.
So when like you need validation and you need support and you need someone to be able to say like, "Wait, wait, wait, hold on. What happened?" So that way you don't feel like you start to feel like you can think for yourself again. And if I'm working with somebody that just left or if they're trying to leave, there's a lot of unraveling, unpacking, and learning what healthy is within yourself and within another relationship. And now I am not the coach that wants to coach you right into another relationship after that. That's
Yeah.
not going to happen with me. But what I do is try and help you feel healthy within yourself and untangle everything that happened and how it's going to show up today. We all leave those kinds of relationships with some trauma,
Mhm.
and let's understand what got you there. And most of the time, they're not done when they're done. My relationship ended in August, but it really ended in like the end of October of that year.
Yeah,
So it's never done when it's done. Let's help you get done and let's help you feel proud, because that's when you can start to rebuild. And that's what a lot of the work I do now is, in addition to high conflict divorce coaching, which is
sure.
certification number 4 that I got this year.
Congratulations. Yeah, that's
Thank
great.
you. Yeah. I
Yeah.
trained Tina Swithin, who is amazing. Tina Swithin runs onemomsbattle.com.
Okay.
Tina is like the high conflict divorce guru, because she divorced basically a sociopath. I think,
Ugh,
um, and
yeah.
well, so I think she thought he was a narcissist, but he ended up really being more of a sociopath.
Mm,
Um, and she went through this when nobody was going through this. And I
mhm.
actually didn't find her blog until after my court case was over.
Oh,
But she
wow.
does a lot of, but I basically, it was like, I wish I had these tools when I was first going through this, because nothing made sense.
Mhm.
Nothing made sense in my divorce. It still doesn't make any sense. I'm 5 years out and it still nothing makes sense. Every time I'm pulled
Right.
back into court, nothing actually makes sense.
Yeah.
But now I expect it not to make sense. And so, I was late to record this with you today because I
Yeah.
had somebody for a consult about a high conflict case, and they were just saying like, none of this makes sense. And I stood in front of the judge and like, and somehow they awarded 50-50. And I was just like, yes, that's what happens. And so I try and just kind of I got that training to put a tool in my toolbox to be able to help people through high conflict divorce, because none of it makes sense. And I wish I
Yeah.
had that when I was going through it. I didn't even know that it existed.
Yeah.
So it's like my practice is, it's kind of well rounded. I like to say I always meet people where they are and what they need.
Yeah.
So it's not like, okay, on Tuesday we're going to talk about a trauma bond, and on Wednesday it's like, it's you come, and 99.9% of the time I have no idea what somebody's bringing to a call. I'm
Yeah.
just prepared to show up for what's here. And I feel like at this point I've talked through everything with clients. So,
No, I'm sure you have, but I think that the fact that you got the training for the high conflict divorce it's not just the another tool in your toolbox. I mean, and that's important, but when it comes to these kinds of relationships, they're all at different stages, and people who are still in the relationship, they're at a very different point than people who are going through a divorce.
mhm.
So I think it that sounds like a totally organic business decision on your part. And
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And it also helps them with like, if they're in the marriage and they're
Mhm.
wanting to leave the marriage,
Yeah.
well, what do you need to start preparing, and where do you need to get your head? Because,
Yeah.
I think a lot of us are very unrealistic, like with what the realities of the family court system are. But the realities of family
Yeah.
court system is that it is a court with judges that may not have been in family law before, and now they're
Mhm.
sitting on a bench and they're making the biggest decision of our life, which is because it has to do with our children,
Yeah.
and so it's it's the most valuable thing. It's like, would you, it's like you're literally like you're standing in front of someone being like, okay, well, I could either have a bike or a car. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
it's like these big, big, big things. And if you're in the relationship, what I like to try and help people do if they're like working on leaving is, one, which lawyer should you be going to? You know,
Yes.
and
Yes.
what's the
Yes.
strategy here, and also what documentation do you need, and pictures of what before you leave, and like how to document so that you can actually use it in court. There's all these like puzzle pieces that we need to think
And
about, and I'm like more equipped to do it now.
that's wonderful, because there are so many people who I'm sure walk into these situations and they don't have that knowledge, and it's going to ultimately end up hurting them in the end. And it's not their fault that they don't have that knowledge.
Hmm.
Yeah, I know someone who started off with one type of lawyer and it was not the right fit, and then got someone else. But we we, not me, but
Hmm.
people in those situations absolutely need people like you, who have like you said, who have navigated the family court system already and know what to expect and know what to look out for and know the questions to ask. So Brava to you. Um, so, what have you learned about emotional and narcissistic abuse as a coach that maybe you wouldn't have learned as only a survivor? Even though I know you were coaching beforehand.
Yeah. I think I think it's mostly that I think there's two things. I think one is that these people are mostly running away from feeling any shame within themselves. And so
Yeah.
they don't have the ability to look inside. And you think that they might give off the facade that they do. And at the beginning of the relationship, they probably showed you that, but they
Mhm.
truly are so afraid to look inside, which is not an excuse not to do it. Like, I don't give a crap if they're afraid or not. You know what I mean? Like, but they don't
Mhm.
look inside. And
Mhm.
because they don't have that ability and that they would rather like throw you in front of a moving vehicle instead of like getting hit by one themselves, it's like they they have an inability to change. And so when I that and that was like my biggest wake up call, I think, as a coach is, and I forgot where I read it, but once I started to see that within myself, that is the biggest thing that I think I've helped other people see is that these people are not going to change. We think
Yeah.
they are, they're going to say they are, their
Yeah.
family might say that they are, a book might say that they have potential to, if they're not going to change because they have to change the way that they think. And in order for an abusive person to change the way that they think, they would have to look inside and acknowledge that they are showing up in a way that is
Exactly.
unfavorable, it's abusive, and they're not going to take accountability for that. And that's
Nope.
also years. You know,
Mhm.
sometimes people will say, like, well, he's going to start therapy. I'm like, start therapy. Like, the
Yes.
the amount of time that it's going to take for this person to look at every single thought and stop blaming you for every issue in their life and treating you with severe disrespect is like, it's we're talking years. And do we want to lose years of our life to the potential or possibility of somebody most likely not changing? And it's like, I think that's the biggest thing is that they they're not going to. And I think as a coach that, and like, because my background is coaching healthy individuals who want to make better life changes. Like when we're in a millennial life crisis, it's like a quarter
Right.
life crisis. We want to make better decisions. We
Mhm.
want to show up for ourselves. We want to be healthier, happier. We want to figure out where we're in our own way. It's a lot of change for those people to change. For like, it was a lot of change for me to change. And I was a fully open book at the time. Like I would have I would have changed anything inside of me and it still was painful, you know? And so when we're talking about somebody who already doesn't even think they have a problem or
Mhm.
that they already don't see an issue in their behavior,
Mhm.
they're not they're not going to. And if they do, it's such a long road. And
Yeah.
do we want to stay in it for that?
Yeah. I remember that was I know I said before that I didn't expect my boss to change, but there was a part that hoped that he would, yeah, I'm not going to lie. I think it was more that I wanted um someone to hold him accountable because I knew that he wasn't going to hold himself accountable. So those are always, I find in these situations, the hardest lessons to learn. Um, so this has been such a fantastic conversation. I just want to give you an opportunity to tell the listeners how they can get in touch with you. If you want to share about your own podcast, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
My podcast is the Relationship Recovery Podcast. My name is Jessica Knight, and the I have almost 100 episodes on there, and
It's
I'd
awesome.
probably say about half of them are interviews.
Mhm.
And it's about different parts of abuse, and the most popular one is the third one that I ever recorded, and it's
Mhm.
about trauma bonding and how we can
Mhm.
heal.
Yeah.
So if you do feel like you're stuck in a trauma bond, or if you don't know if you're stuck in a trauma bond, I suggest that one. It's episode number 3. And I talk about that cycle I touched on about intermittent abuse with positive reinforcement.
Mhm.
And so in addition to that, my website is emotionalabusecoach.com. There's a link on there to get to high conflict divorce coaching with me. And my Instagram is at emotional abuse coach. And I'm always happy to help. And if people are wanting to see, like, is this the right fit for me? I always offer a free consult to see if we're a good fit to work together.
Mhm.
With high conflict divorce, we don't have to meet every week or every other week. We kind of meet along your case. So if
Mhm.
you are somebody listening and you need some support there, we totally can book, as like, it doesn't have to be consistent, but if you are leaving an emotionally abusive or narcissistic relationship, it does need to be consistent, because that's what's best for you to actually create progress.
Yeah.
And so, but all the information is on my website, and I'm always happy to hear from people, or to even hear if listening to this was helpful.
Absolutely. And I will put all the links that you mentioned in the show notes as well.
Perfect.
Jessica, thank you again. It's really been a pleasure talking with you. Thank you so much for
Thank you
coming
so
on the
much.
podcast. Oh, it's my
Thank you for
pleasure.
having me.
Thank you for listening to my conversation with Jessica Knight on Emotional Abuse is Real. If you would like to connect with Jessica and learn more about her services, I've left her website and social media information in the show notes, along with a link to her own podcast, the Relationship Recovery Podcast. If you would like to share your emotional abuse story here on the podcast, please don't hesitate to reach out at hello@sereneleads.com, through our Facebook page, Emotional Abuse is Real, or through Instagram at Serene Leads Rights. Please note that this podcast should not be used as a substitute for professional mental health services. If you are a victim of emotional abuse and need help, please call or text the Suicide and Crisis Hotline at 988. Or call the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-7233. You can also text START, that's START, to 88788. Once again, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. Follow me on Instagram and on Facebook. And if you can, please support us through our Buy Me a Coffee page. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you next time.